Hey, I'm Michael Bell. Welcome to Pace TV. Welcome to another show. And we have with us today the beautiful Jamie. And Jamie is a self-publishing author. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about how that came about. Jamie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, first time here on Pace TV?
First time ever.
Oh, great. So welcome to the show. Welcome to the crew. So now you are a self-publishing author.
Yes.
And you've published how many books?
I have published 6 books, and I have 2 books, a book now with a publisher.
But and the 7th one is complete?
The 7th one's complete.
So now you self-publish.
I do.
Now how does that compare to people who write books and have a publisher print them for them and you do all of that?
You know, it's a whole process that I have dipped my toes in and haven't really pursued very much, but you know, because when you're finished the book, the manuscript, then you have to write a synopsis and a query letter and go to usually an agent and get an agent, and then from there the agent finds the publisher for you. And I did that a little bit with a nonfiction book I first wrote, and which was never picked up. So at that point I started writing fiction, and I have not had, I did try initially when I was writing to publish with, to find a publisher,
Right.
but didn't really put a lot of heart and energy into it.
So now you've got 7 books written?
I have 7 written books.
And they're all fiction?
These 7 books are fiction.
Okay.
Yes.
And, so you've gone now to a self-publishing situation where the manuscripts are basically somewhere to be printed up on demand?
What I have is I put the books online myself. I do the whole thing. I hire an editor. I hire someone to do the cover art, and then when I have a formatter, and then I stick the books on a couple of places. One is Amazon, and the other one is called Draft to Digital, and they put it on a whole panoply of different publishing sites.
Now, let me just ask you a question regarding that.
Yeah.
Do they approve or disapprove? Do they have to approve, say Amazon? Jamie has a manuscript, a book to be published. Does Amazon have to bless that? Or?
No, it's a very independent situation.
Really?
Yes. The way you get to know whether it's okay, what you've written is all right, is the feedback from your readers.
Okay.
So I get all kinds of, people go on and they critique the book, they give me feedback, reviews, and then what needs to be tweaked, what doesn't need to be tweaked, and is it well written or not.
Well, now, do you market the product? Let's talk about the first book, for instance.
Okay.
And it was published, it was sent out to the public via, I guess, Amazon, and you got some feedback, I'm sure, from your readers.
Right, quite a bit.
Now, who markets it, so to speak? How does the rest of the world know about it?
Okay. Well, first of all, it is on Amazon, and in 2012 when I first put it on, there weren't quite as many authors, and there wasn't quite as much competition, so it was a little easier to be found. But also, Amazon gives you some perks if you put it on with them. And one of the perks is they allow you to do it, put the book for free for 5 days a month, not a month, 5 days a period, which is quarterly. So I was able to use that and then go out and find people who would advertise my free book, and then I was often a bestseller for that day.
Amazing. This is something that a lot of people, including myself, have no idea that there's a market out there for self-publishing and successful, apparently.
I've had a lot of luck with it.
Yeah.
Really, quite a bit.
And as far as your feedback from your readers, is that pretty constant?
When I'm selling books, I'm getting reviews, and I've been very blessed right from the beginning. I had just terrific reviews. I've had some criticism, of course, but but for the most part, I've had really people who like my book and are very positive about it, and it's been wonderful. It's been just a wonderful, joyous experience, really.
Great. Now, what about Amazon? They have to make some money out of this, don't they?
They sure do.
So they take a piece of the action, so to speak?
They do.
Okay, so whatever your book is selling for, they get a percentage?
Exactly.
Okay. So now there's 6 books already published, a 7th one on its way. So give our viewers some sort of idea of the subject matter of each of the books.
Okay, well, each of my books is somewhat unique. I do have 2 series. One I call the Shadow series, and one I call the Spirit series. And the Shadow Spirit series I'll stay with, but because that was my first book. The first book I published was Out of the Shadow. And those are mysteries, psychological mysteries.
Ah,
And so they are primarily, there's very little romance, so I consider those pure mystery, suspense.
now you would call, I'm going to use a phrase here that you, don't take offense, but would you call them whodunits?
Yes, actually I would. They are whodunits, not in the traditional mystery format, but more psychological suspense.
Really?
But you don't know until the end who done it.
Right.
So, so yes, it would be that. And then I wrote a second one in that series. So there's Night of the Shadow, and those are one of the protagonists is a psychotherapist. So so it's a book that takes place in both first person and third person. It goes back and forth in dealing with the whole idea of trying to create some suspense and trying to confuse the reader a little bit so they don't know right off the bat who did it.
So now is the second book a continuation of the first book?
It is and it isn't. It's a series, so I have the same, I have some of the same people in it, but the therapist is consistent in both of them, and actually so is the victim in the first book comes in, but there's a separate plot in the second.
So just give us, for the viewers, the remaining 5 that are out there. You have 2 that...
Well, then I have 2 that are Native American mysteries. It takes place on a pueblo in New Mexico, because I lived and worked a number of years on a pueblo in New Mexico. So and was exposed to things that very few people are exposed to. So I was able to incorporate all that into my Spirit series, which are 2 mysteries which have the same protagonist and take place on this fictitious pueblo. So that's those, and then the rest of the books are just romantic suspense.
Would you like to tell us briefly what your period of time publishing has been? I mean...
I started in 2012 when my husband was dying, and to keep myself from going insane while I was being a caretaker. And I have published, as I said, I'm on my last book for now. I've been thinking of maybe another Native American mystery, but right now I'm on my last book. And so it's the last 7 years.
Yeah. As we were talking about your career as a self-made publisher and self-publishing, it dawned on me that there's got to be many more people like yourself that do that self-publish books. Right. Now, is that the case?
Yes, many.
So, many people?
Many.
Wow.
Millions.
And so the days of publishing with a publisher and getting a literary agent and all of those things, not necessarily so, huh?
Not necessarily so.
Interesting.
The majority of people publish themselves anyway,
really?
I think. I believe.
So now going back to your background, Jamie, 6 books published, 1 in print, or getting ready to be put in print. If I were watching, say, a show like we are doing today, and I say, okay, let me think about that. How would I go about finding out about you and your books?
Well, that's a good question, because I am not one of the better self-promoters. But Amazon does give you an option of putting your books on for free once a quarter. And when you do that, you can advertise a free book fairly cheaply, and you do pick up a number of readers that way. I have, for the most part, I have sold through, I think, word of mouth.
I'm sorry?
Word of mouth.
A word of mouth, okay.
Yes, that the people who have read my books, who like me, often refer me to other people, and that's been the way I think I've sold the majority of my books, because I do not promote.
Yeah.
And
See,
now it's getting, and now I'm at a point where I have to do something.
Myself, I don't know how many people out there are as worse off as I am as far as being computer literate, but I would have a difficult time finding your product, your book, unless I knew you and knew where to look.
Right, and I'm sure there are people like that. But I think, most of the people who read my book are probably at that age where they're not computer literate like us, and who know where to go and what to look for. And there's avid readers. There's a web page called Goodreads, where avid readers go, and they look for books and they look for authors. And now Amazon has taken that over too. Amazon has taken almost everything over in the publishing field. But and that's one way to get yourself out there. People find you.
Now, do you have any idea what the age brackets are? The younger people?
Do you know, I don't, and I don't know where they keep those records. There's a thing called Author Central, where I can go and look at some of my statistics, but it doesn't break it down like that. So I don't know the age bracket, the sex bracket, any of that stuff. I have no real knowledge of who's reading my books, but I would think there are probably more women than men, although quite a few men have reviewed me too, so men read them too. But I would think more women, and 20 to 40 or 50-ish would be probably the vast majority, I would think, but I don't know for a fact.
Now you're an author who became an author in your midlife, right? Is that safe to say? And your career is all done, and your formal education was all done, and apparently at some point in time you needed to do something new and different. Right.
I was a psychotherapist in private practice for many years. I ran some group homes, and I got to the point when I was in my 40s when I decided I needed to do something a little bit more uplifting in my life. So I actually started writing nonfiction. I started writing books about therapy. And then, I don't know, the bug hit me to write some fiction. And I just segued over to fiction, and have never looked back.
Now, are you an avid reader yourself? Do you read?
I am. I am. I love to read.
I see that's probably what inspired you to get into the writing, because good readers become good writers in many cases.
I'm not sure about the good writers, to be honest with you. I thought being a reader, a voracious reader like I was, that I would have no problem writing, because I would know the structure and I would have an idea how to do it. I went in, and my writing was just awful at first.
Well, now, how do you know your writing is awful? Well, if you're I guess an avid reader, you know if one sentence makes sense within a paragraph, etc. And there are some do's and don'ts. Now, how did you get through all that?
Well, luckily there are people who train you. There's a group. I just happened to because of the people I knew, and because of the conference I went to at San Diego State. Actually, they had a big writers conference every year. I was pulled into the Romance Writers of America, and there I found a teacher, and I went to school for a long time trying to figure out what I was doing wrong and how to make it better.
Now, were you in a class, or was it on a one-to-one?
Yeah, no, it was a class.
A class.
I found a woman who gave classes on writing, and I went there for a long time, as I said, weekly, and then she would also critique my work, and I got feedback, and I joined critique groups, which was very frightening because I knew I didn't know what I was doing. And I go to these groups and put my writing out there, and people would then critique it for me. And
It sounds to me like a period of growth.
it was.
You know, you're starting off and stumbling here and there, and then you're meeting people who can help you along the way. And I'm sure you helped others along the way. So what's the period of time from the first time when you went into a group of aspiring authors until you felt confident enough to put out a product?
Well, I put my product out under, kind of unusual circumstances. I wrote for a long time, never felt as, I did a little, I put them out, I put a book here and there out to, a few agents, and when I didn't get any real response that I wanted, I just stuck them back in the computer and let them sit there, and they really, got moldy after a while. But then when my husband was sick, and the last 2 years of his life, I had to be by his side, taking care of him most of the time. I didn't know what to do with myself when he was sleeping, and which was a lot of the time. So I would go, one day I just got this epiphany: why not take some of these books out and look at them again and see if there's anything I can do with them? Because I had like maybe 4 or 5 written by then. Not perfected, but written. And
complete.
Yes. So I went back in, I took them out one by one, shook them out, rewrote. The first one I had to totally rewrote the book. And in 2012, it was July of 2012, I put my first book online. And it was just, I needed something to keep me going. And that was, and I wasn't working any longer. So this became my, the thing that kept my spirit.
That was a godsend to you, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
It was,
and your life
survive that period.
And your life changed, I presume, at that point.
It's been, and it's been one book after another, year after year now. And so, yes, my life has changed immensely from that period.
Not that it's important, but I'm just curious, how much time between books does it take you? Once you finish the book, before you're ready to start a second one?
I usually put out about a book a year. I'm not one of these people who put out, who just manufactures 3 or 4 books. I don't know how they do it. I really have no idea.
Yeah, they probably have a formula. They just embroider.
They would have to have and they have to be very highly, very controlled and know what they're doing and be motivated. That's right, exactly. And I'm not one of those people. I want to do it my way. This is my fun period. I don't need to make money at this. This is for joy. This is just, I want to tell a story. I want people to enjoy the story, I hope. And that's my only goal in this.
Well, that's wonderful. It sounds like more like a job that you enjoy rather than a job you must do.
It's definitely a job I enjoy. Now, that said, there are moments when I think I'm going to throw the computer through the window because I just can't get something to work, or the ideas just dry up or whatever. The
characters in the book. Your first 2 books in particular, that was a bit of a mystery. It had certain elements of a suspense, I presume. Yes. How do you develop your characters?
Well, to be honest with you, a lot of authors do a lot of work on their characters. They get pictures and they put them on bulletin boards, and they do psychological profiles, and they live with their characters for a while. I was a psychotherapist for so many years that I wing it a little bit more. I figure, and I actually take my characters, or a lot of the time in the mystery suspense, are composite of some of my clients. These are people I got to know very well over the years. So I take bits and pieces from their life stories and their issues and conflicts and difficulties and triumphs, and put them in, along with, of course, probably a part of myself and other people I know. So that's how, so I don't do as thorough a job as a lot of different authors do.
Well, you may not be the classic of...
Right, exactly.
But you're doing it in your way, and you have to be a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Right.
And now, so how do you have that whole scenario in your mind before you write, or do you develop it as you go?
There are two types of authors. There's what's called a plotter, and there's what's called a pantser. I tend to lean more happily on the pants side. I really wing it to a large degree. What I do is I have an idea right at the beginning of a book, what I want to start with and what I want to end with. The middle is often a little less clear, and that's where I sometimes run into trouble because I come across a scene and can't move on beyond that. I don't know what goes next, and that's kind of an interesting process. But I do often know where I want to start and where I want to end, so I have some path.
Right. Now, do you refer back to the classics, authors like Agatha Christie and the rest of them? Have you read them, and do you think they influenced your method of writing?
I've read, I know as a kid I read all of Nancy Drew, and I have read quite a few of Agatha Christie's and Patricia Highsmith and other mystery authors. But and I'm sure they influenced. I can't say specifically I've taken certain things, but I'm sure they've influenced how I write. I don't write a real traditional mystery for the most part. I have one that's close, but most of my books are psychological suspense.
So the first book was the kind of leading into the second book.
Right.
Because they were a series.
Right.
So you need to know, you have to end the book, but you can't end the story, correct?
Well, in that book, I ended the story.
Did you?
Yes, but I picked up on the characters in the next book.
Not the title character, but others in the book? Other characters?
A number of the characters.
Okay.
The sociopath, the protagonist, is the same. The main character in the book is a psychotherapist. And one of her patients. There's two actually main characters, and both of them show up at some point in the next book, as does the bad guy. So, even though it's a totally different story, there's a continuation.
Right. It's fascinating. Now, the second set of books had to do with a different part of the country, a different part of the world. It was Native Americans.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that. How did you develop that, and what was your reference?
Well, having lived on the Zuni Indian Reservation for 3 years, and as I said earlier, being really, seeped in the culture and seeing things and being a part of things that very few people outside of the reservation ever see, I really knew I had some interesting material there, and I wanted to take that material and make a story with it, and that's what I did. So I took what I knew and I used it in a different way to tell the story. Because
unfortunately many people, including myself, know very little about the Native American culture. And so I might be fascinated to know just basically how deep do you go into the character's background and history as far as American
what I try to do is go into the cultural background. My main character happens to be kind of a prototype of me. A young woman from Philadelphia who comes to the reservation to work. And my main male character, it's a romance that turns into a life history type of, because there's a series. And he's Native American, but he was raised off the reservation. So I have these two characters, but what I go into primarily is I want people to understand the cultural influences on the story, because this is a totally different culture.
Yes, absolutely.
And the mysteries of it are partly just cultural as well as the actual storyline that I develop.
It's fascinating because I guess you had to delve in yourself and discover some of the cultural uniqueness of that area.
I was very lucky, you know. I because I worked for the hospital,
Yeah.
and became really familiar with a lot of the people. I was pulled into families. You know, became a part of,
And that
and
was
invited into, you know, people dying and funerals and ceremonials and, you know, all kinds of situations that people who just come to visit the Pueblo would never experience.
And that was part of your professional life,
Right.
which is very
Right.
interesting. Yeah, so you got to know the in depth of some family situations,
I did.
and that gave you the basis for some of your characters.
And one thing about living on the Pueblo is that, you know, they still believe in things like witchcraft.
Yes, I know. Yeah, I've heard.
And families, you know, are labeled
Yeah.
and avoided and ostracized, and I was able to then get into those families because those are families that needed the most help,
Right. Exactly.
and see what happened and experience it,
So
and use that as a part of the basis of my mystery.
We're running out of time, and I'm so sorry to have to cut short because it's such a fascinating story. But you have to come back sometime, and we'll get a little more information about what you're doing with your life today, and how the publishing business is coming along. And I want to thank you very much for giving us a fantastic viewpoint that most of us have never seen before.
Thank you.
Jamie, thank you so
enjoyed it.
much.